or to this computer. Okay, there we go. All right, guys, so let's jump in. I'm going to just quickly introduce myself. So my name is Larnell, for those of you who don't know me, and I think I know most of you who are here today. I'm an American, been living in France for 9 years now. It's actually kind of getting crazy that how long it has been. And I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for almost all of the 9 years that I've been living here in France. But about 2 years ago, I stopped teaching only, and I started a company called Toem Teaching Agency, which is a recruitment agency for language teachers to teach at higher education. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years. But we've kind of broken off into do a separate project, which is called Resourceful. I'll talk to you about that at the end, so I'm not going to go into that right now. That's what you guys are all joining through. It's Resourceful. And the idea that I wanted to do today was just to share some of the insight, I guess, I've gathered over the years of teaching with you. All right. So here's what we have for today. Can you guys all see the screen? I just wanted to make sure because I'm.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So you guys have all joined to talk about classroom engagement, right? One is the biggest topics, I think, when I'm speaking to teachers, when I hear us in the hallway around the water cooler, complaining or talking about what's going on in our classes. It's, I can't get them off my phone, their phones, they're not listening to me. I don't know how to get them to be engaged. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to begin by speaking about common barriers to classroom engagement to give you some background and a good foundation to understand where is all of these barriers, where are all these problems coming from? Okay, we're going to look at structural barriers and also individual barriers, or we're going to look at issues that are coming from the student's perspective. Okay, after we've gone over that, we're going to jump into solutions because that's what you guys are here for, right? We're going to be looking at how projects or teaching through projects, building trust in your classroom, and using rituals and traditions, as well as injecting real world activities can dramatically change the engagement in your classroom. Okay, and then following that, I'll stop talking and it will be your turn to participate, and we'll have a group activity. I'm going to create some breakout rooms, and you guys will be able to go into the breakout rooms and do the activity together. Okay, and then we'll come back and we'll hear what everyone had to say, and then we'll close. And that will be all for this morning. So it should be roughly 2 hours. I believe that will be enough time for us to get through. If you have any questions, this is kind of a, what do you call it? This is a low or chill workshop. So if you have a question or you want to interject, go ahead. Don't feel like you have to just keep listening to me talking. You can go ahead and ask your question. One extra thing, and before I get in, that I wanted to say is that what I'm going to be focusing on right now really pertains to large groups or large classes, but I still think it's applicable even if you're teaching one-to-one. Okay, but most of the things that I'm going to talk about really do have much more of an impact when we're talking about large groups of students. Okay, any questions, comments before we jump in?
So far, so good.
Just one thing. I thought it was only 1 hour, so I don't think I'll be able to stay for the second half. I'm really sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
Just want to pre-warn. Sorry.
No problem.
Thanks.
All right, so let's jump in here. So common barriers to classroom engagement. You guys see this video here. I'm sure we've all experienced this at least once in our lives if we were teachers, right? We've had our students are on their phones, they're looking away from you, they're chit-chatting in the corner, nothing, it's not, you don't get the vibe, there's no vibe going on, okay? So let's look at what is causing this. So I'm going to start with structural barriers, which I like to think of as things we can't really control. I mean, we really can't control what our students' perspectives are when they come into the classroom either, but these are the kinds of things that are just built into the system, right? That cause problems for engagement. By the way, you guys will all have an email with the slides afterwards, so you'll have them as well. So large class sizes, which I just want to ask, what's the average size of class that you guys have?
Actually, I teach to adults, but that's one-to-one classes.
Mhm.
And when I teach to there are like 2 years after their A-level classes, the French BTS,
Mhm.
they're in between 15 to 25, sometimes
Okay.
up to 30.
Oh yeah,
So
so
yeah,
yeah,
but
you're when you get to, well, I think after about 20, you start to get to what I call large class.
yeah.
Okay, so you
Well, they usually started the year at the beginning of the year, they're around 25, in between 25 and 30 students. And
Mhm.
at the end of the first year, they go down to 15 to 20.
Yeah, some desistement. Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so that's pretty typical. What I would say is about 20. Above that, you start, for me, I consider that to be a large class. Anybody else?
I would say 25 on average.
25 on average. Okay. I think for me, an average is about 21, 22, something like that. But the largest that I've ever had to teach was actually, it was insane. It was 70. And it was,
What?
yeah, it was a whole week, intensive week. 70 students. I was managing them by myself. I did have on one day where they did the oral presentation, someone to help me do that, but 70 students,
Right.
that was a lot. So large classes are a problem or a barrier to engagement because it makes it hard for us to effectively reach each student, right? Even if you have a smaller class, it sometimes feels hard to reach each student. And the students that are struggling to understand what you're saying or to follow the material, they have the tendency to either not interact with you or the others, or they might become disruptive and start making noise, talking, they're on their phones. And quite often, this, if you can think to your own classes, when you look at students who are being disruptive, most of the time it's because they don't understand, right? So they might feel lost and detached from the class. And so just the fact that you have a large class is one of the biggest barriers, I think, to classroom engagement. We'll look at just a moment how we can mitigate that in just a moment. All right, moving on. Time and scheduling constraints. So you guys are all in France, so this will be applicable to you. But sometimes you have a class that's very short and it can make it hard to get deep or dig deep with your students, right? They kind of, it's hard to get below the service level. You do the introduction and then, oh, we're already halfway done. So it can be a problem to having your students feel that they really accomplished something at the end of the class. The opposite side of that, or the opposite coin, is that you have very long classes. And if you're teaching in higher education, which I think many of you are, this is a feature that you have probably encountered, right? Classes that are 3.5, 4 hours long. And that can make it really hard because students are tired, they lose their concentration, and maintaining a flow is hard to do when you have that much time with your students, okay? Also, if you're, as I said, specifically in France, if you're working in higher education, you've got alternance, which is a great program. Personally, I think it's great. We should have this all over the world, but it really does make it hard for a teacher to have something consistent because you might only see your students once a month. And then you might not see them for 3 months because they're on stage or at work. So it can be a barrier to having good engagement because basically you have to kind of get to know your students all over again when you meet them. Any questions or comments up to that point?
I definitely agree with everything you just said.
Okay. Good.
This is like my whole life.
Yes, it's all of our lives.
And it's difficult to engage with a student or have engaged student when you barely know them. I teach to bachelor students in bank and I see them just once a month.
That's
even sometimes a bit more than that. It's
yeah. How long is the class?
It's a 3-hour class.
Oh, yeah.
But something maybe you didn't mention, but I'd like to add, it's also when you have different English levels in the same class.
I
that's
will.
also is
yes,
I believe so. But that's also
coming,
such a struggle.
You hit the nail on the head, as we say. But it's definitely, I have it here as one of the main reasons as well. Okay, suboptimal classroom structure. So this is something I think a lot of us don't think too much about, but it is really, for my opinion, a barrier to student engagement. So you might have a really small classroom. I mean, I've taught in closets, literally. in closets. Schools under construction, and we had to go and teach with 15 people in what was like basically a broom closet. I could not believe they were making us do class in the environment, but that was what it was. Or poorly designed or laid out classrooms. So, if you've got these typical long rows of tables, for me, that equals a dead classroom. It doesn't have to, and we can talk about ways to navigate around that. But typically for me, that structure is just a recipe for your students to be not connected to each other and not connected to you. Okay, so we'll talk about how you can change, but I think really thinking about when you walk into the classroom, take a look at it physically and see, is this layout going to be, helping engagement in my classroom? And most likely it's not. Mixed ability classes. So this is what you were saying. So many large classes, you've got different levels all over the place, especially at the university level, but I think that's applicable at high school and below as well. And I think you've got two big problems. You've got the problem that advanced students are frustrated because they feel held back and they can't really feel like they can be at the level that they need and they're bored. And then they may also start to act out and talk and not pay attention. Or you have students who are weaker, who are extremely intimidated by the students that are stronger in the classroom. I'll say something which I think is a bit controversial. Maybe people will disagree with me, but we'll go ahead and say that. I don't think it's a good idea to put group students mixed together. Like, for example, to say I'm going to make a group of one strong student and 3 weak ones so that the stronger one will help the weaker ones. In my experience, personally, it has never really been a good thing unless the student that's stronger has that pedagogical mindset and they're willing to help. And that can be the case. And if you have a student like that, go ahead and do it. But it has been my experience, honestly, that if you put them mixed like that into groups, you're going to have one person that does all the work and the others will just do nothing. And that person may feel a bit of resentment and frustration in that situation. So we'll talk a bit more about that, but mixed ability classes are definitely a barrier to engagement. Anyone want to comment or break in?
I tried that. I also experienced that at the very beginning of the school year, and I get to the same results. Indeed, they are not teacher, so they're trying to help. I think they like being given the responsibility to try to manage a group, but when they are missing vocab or when the input is too difficult for them to, even though they understand it, it's not always easy for them to explain to the other part of the class. And sometimes they switch in French also because they think it's easier to explain. So it's not always really efficient to ask
I think
the more advanced student to help the others. So yeah,
I think that's really been my experience. I know that a lot of people they do that, or they would suggest, and I'm gonna say if it works for you, it works for you. But I really do think that there are bigger advantages to grading, if you will, your students and putting them together at the level that they are. And we'll talk just a moment about why and how you can do that. But I really do think keeping in mind. Go ahead.
So I was just wondering, what is your experience with the non-mixed classes? Like, how does that work? How does that dynamic work when you have only the weak ones or only the strong ones?
Well, to be honest, I've rarely ever had that. I think maybe once or twice where I had some 5-year students who were just like, they'd already been abroad. They came back, they were already, B2, strong B2s, almost B1, C1 rather. I think you'd have less of a problem than in a classroom if you don't have the problem of mixed ability. You could take that off. If you've got everyone's homogeneous more or less, you could say that this is not going to be a barrier necessarily to engagement. You might have other issues like people who just don't want to work, but that's besides the point. But in most cases, I feel like you really do have these classes that are just lots of levels.
It wasn't so much a question about like, have you had a class where everyone's the same? It was more like, have you been in a school where they've basically labeled some people as weak, like officially labeled, and officially labeled some people as much better? Because I actually find that those labels, within a school, right?
Mhm.
are very harmful because the student goes into the classroom thinking, I've been labeled as dumb. And someone else goes in thinking, I don't need this class. I'm labeled as smart.
Yeah.
And
And I
I've
think,
had that, and
yeah.
I don't know, I haven't preferred it. That way.
I mean, I think that it can, if the way in the way in which it's with, excuse me, in the way in which it is done can be, that can be harmful if you're doing it like that. But most of the times where I've had those classes where they've been graded according to their level, they've done a practice test of some kind, and it's according to the score. And my students have been happy because I had, there was a school where they got to change the level if they went. The first 2 weeks, they had the opportunity to spend in the classroom and say, I think this is too easy for me, I can move up, or this is too difficult, I'm going to go back down. And so that having it free like that, I think helps to mitigate that problem of being like labeled entre guillemets. But I think a lot of students appreciate being in a classroom, if it's possible, where they can be with those who are at the same level as them. But I see your points. Definitely, you don't want to unduly label your students and pick them out. And we'll talk about how to do that.
The word is offensive anyway, to say a weaker class or advanced class. I think I know one school actually does that when they group the student by level, but the class are named with the level. So this is beginner or A2 students or B1 students. They don't actually label them with strong words,
Yeah, just the level that they are at. Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Excuse me. We're going to move on to the next one. Oh, the pollen is taking over today. All right, individual barriers. So we looked at structural barriers, and like I said, those are the kinds of things that we can't really do much about when we're teaching, because we can't predict them. They just happen because that's how the school is organized, where we're working. That's what I call structural barriers. We're going to look at individual barriers, or what I say, coming from the student's perspective. And I think this is where you really are talking much more personally here. So I'm going to give you an example of this girl. This is not her real name. This is not her, obviously, stock photo, truly admit. But her name, I'm going to call her Nikki. But I'm going to tell you the story of Nikki, who is a real student that I had about 2 years ago. So Nikki, at the very beginning of class, we did our individual interviews. I just kind of got to know each of the students, asking them, what are the struggles and the difficulties that you have, particularly in English, and what's been your previous experience with English? And I noticed that Nikki was sitting in the back of the class, and she was refusing to participate in almost any of the small little warm-up activities that I had done. So she had a person sitting next to her. She was just like choosing not to participate. And so I kind of observed this. And when it came her time to pass to do the interview, she told me the story that I was almost in tears. So she told me that she had very bad experiences with learning English, particularly in class, when she was in high school and in elementary school. And her previous teacher in high school had basically told her, because she has dyslexia, that it was impossible for her to learn English. So de toute façon, c'est même pas la peine. So when I heard this, and I could see it written on her face, how distressing this was for her. She felt stupid. She felt like she could not achieve anything, and that there was literally no point. And so we had a good talk, and it really almost made me cry about just how impactful that meeting with her teacher was, that she felt that she didn't have the right to participate. So we're going to go over a couple of these issues, but keep Nikki in mind, because it's a real person, it's a real story. It really did happen. And these are the kinds of things that students like Nikki are facing when they come to your class, or some of them when they come to your class. So as I kind of mentioned, with Nikki, many students have had past negative experiences, especially in the French education system. I'm not going to pick on, I know we could all go on for hours, the French education system, but we're going to try to keep it to a minimum, because, but in France, right, you've got the fact that the curriculum heavily emphasizes written English over spoken English. Okay, almost exclusively the homework and the activities that they're doing are about writing and understanding writing, so reading comprehension. And additionally, there's, I think, a national tick, or a national obsession, if you will, with accent. And I think there's a lot of history behind that in France. but they have most likely have experienced ridicule in their classrooms in the past. So you've probably all heard the expression mon accent est terrible, je vais pas parler, ou je suis horrible comme je parle, etc., etc. Right? So keeping that in mind, that your students are coming in there with a little bit of baggage most of the time, in terms of how they've learned and experienced English classes in the past. Not very positive for a lot of them. Okay. Perceived irrelevance of English. This is, I think, is a big one. So especially if you're working in higher education, but I think it can be the case as well in high school. They are like, why do we have to do this? I'm not planning on working outside of France. There's no reason for me to learn how to speak English. And when you see the fact that the lower importance of English or language studies is reflected in the weight of the grades of their class, it kind of also gives them that impression. So when you've got a coefficient 1 for your English class and their science class, for example, if their engineers is coefficient 6, right? That just going to make them feel like I don't really need to try that hard in this class. Why? It's not important for me because I need to worry more about these other subjects. Okay. So that is what is in the back of a lot of students' minds regarding English. You guys are following me up to there? Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Definitely.
So lack of trust. So as I said earlier, previous learning environments can be negative, and your students may not believe or trust that you can provide them with a safe learning space. And what I mean a safe learning space is that they don't feel like they're going to be criticized or humiliated in public in front of their students, of their colleagues, and that they can, what you have to say to them in terms of feedback is constructive. It's not there to tear them down or make them feel like they can't achieve something, right? And unfortunately, as many of you may be aware, it's not always the case, I guess, in general, but especially here in France, and the way in which education, the approach to education takes place for many teachers is to emphasize what the student isn't doing correct and not to support them where they are doing well. So you also have at the beginning of the year, the fact that your students probably don't know each other, especially if they're in the first year or if they're in école prépa. They may not know each other, and so that can also make it hard for them to do the kind of activities that are engaging and fun. Okay. All right, so we got to the end of kind of setting a background for what's going on in the classroom and why engagement is difficult. Hold on, just let me bring this up here. So I wanted to ask you guys to think about a class that you've had or you have currently, and tell me if any of the barriers that we discussed just now are present or were present in your class. Did I call on someone? Just like in the...
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, definitely all the barriers you just presented, I'm facing them on daily basis. You know, I mean, the mixed ability classes, the difference between the beginners and the advanced student, the beginner student, the negative experience. Also, that's something that come up all the time. Students telling me that they had a previous teacher telling them how bad they are. But as you mentioned, I think it's also quite structural because indeed in the French education system, we focus more on what students do wrong rather than what they do right. So one of the things I do at the beginning of the school year is first session is really giving the student the opportunity to know each other, to learn about myself also, but also to set up the class rules along the year. So we talk a lot about respect. What does respect means for them? What they're expecting from this class? What are the things they want to do, the things they don't want to do, and we focus a lot on not humiliating each other, not laughing at anyone's accent or mispronunciation, you know. So yeah, I'm trying really to focus on that at the very beginning of the school year. So we're off to a good start with the student. It does not always work, because sometimes when I point out that laughing at someone can be perceived as disrespectful, they sometimes answer back that this is the way they communicate and there is nothing wrong about that, you know. So I don't know, you know, 20 students are really challenging. So but I believe it's really important to set those things right at the very beginning of the year.
Definitely. It has to be at the beginning. I mean, you can come in afterwards if it's not the case. I mean, for most of us, I think that the school year is over now, but at the beginning of the year, when you first meet them, it has to go in. That has to be set in stone, so that they are understanding that.
Actually make them write down the rule on paper. So you know, very often now our teacher has to change class to classes depending on student, but because I have a physical disability, I'm in a wheelchair. Most of the school I work with, they actually assign me one class. So I'm lucky.
You don't have to
privilege that I have one class. So that's also gives me the opportunity to, you know, set up my class the way I want to, and so we can display a lot of papers, rules and everything on the wall. So I really work on that and make them write down all the rules they agreed on together for the school year. And when something happened during classes, I can say, hey guys, remember? It's just written right here. This is what you decided together. So please follow your own rules. You know?
Yeah.
And it actually worked quite well with first-year students.
Okay, well, you guys you all have a tip now. Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Well, I've never had the chance to teach in France yet, but I used to teach in Turkey. I taught in Turkey for a year, and I had a group of students. It was my last group, that's what I remember. They refused to speak in English because they thought it was useless. They were exactly on the same frame of mind as some French students are. They would say, like, why do I need to learn English, but I'm going to study a career in Turkey and I'm going to be living in Turkey forever. Why do I need English for? And then they would refuse to speak in English. And since I didn't speak Turkish, they would start speaking in Turkish. So it was a bit, but it was the end of the year and they were all very tired and they didn't really, lessons were not that interesting because we were giving all the lessons by management. So I didn't really have the chance to tweak it, to make it fun. So it wasn't a very good experience, neither for me or for them. But yeah, that was the main barrier that I found. Like, basically they found it useless. They didn't see the point, really.
Yeah, I mean, as it's so common. They were in higher education, Maria.
Yes.
Yeah.
First year, they were kind of in a prep school that taught them English for them to join university afterwards.
Okay.
So it was kind of in between high school and university.
Yeah, the prepa, especially at that age group, they're like 18, 19, some of them are 17.
Yes, exactly.
They still are quite immature in terms of, thinking about their future. And so it's up to us to try to do best to help them to understand that.
Yeah.
And thank you, Maria.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Obviously, I'm biased because I'm French. I've been raised here and I've lived here for so long. But I do believe that it's kind of changing, this idea that French students think that English is useless for them because of globalization, because also they travel. A lot of my students have been traveling with their parents for some time now. So they are starting to see what the benefits of learning a second language. But where I think things are having a hard time to change, it's more about how to get over the past negative experience, about the accent also. You know, they have this strong idea that if you speak another language, you have to mimic the accent, but also because most of the pedagogy, most of the course book, the French one, are edited by French editors, and they are lacking out everything about stress, pronunciation, and so on. So
yes,
that's also a structural problem, I guess.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about it in just a moment, because it's really, I think, yeah, it's a key point.
At the core of the problem.
Yeah, core. All right. So we're going to move on. So we talked about the problems, right? Okay. So let's talk about the solutions. Like I said earlier, that's what you guys are here for. So here we go. All right. So teaching through projects. Okay. I'm gonna, like I said, this is, I think, something that I gear towards those of you who are teaching in larger groups. It can still be applicable, even if you have small classrooms, one or one-to-one. But we're going to look at what I say is this is to help both some of the problems that happen with structural barriers and individual barriers as well. Okay, now there's a lot of text on the side, so I didn't include it on the slides for you, but they will be in the email that I sent to you guys. So you will have all of that information. I didn't want to charge it too much with text. Okay, so teaching through projects, and what does that mean? It means that instead of doing one lesson where you maybe focus on a grammar point or a certain vocabulary, and you do an activity, you do a warm-up, you do a repeat thing, and then you close down with something, and then the next lesson is something completely different. You're talking about a project that's lasting for a long time. I know some of you are very familiar with that already. Looking at you, Ali, I think you've got good skills with working with projects, but you're looking at a long-term thing. We're talking about minimum of 3 classes, right? And there's a final deliverable at the end. Right. So reason number 1 for using projects is that it addresses the issue of the large class size and mixed ability at the same time. Okay, so effectively, if you're working in a project, you can form small groups of maybe 4 to 5 students, or maybe less, and have them work on the project during autonomous time in class. Okay, and what that effectively does is that it reduces a class from, let's say, about 40 students to much more manageable mini classes of 4 to 5 students each. Okay, and in project-based learning, I'm not going to go too deep into that, because that could be a whole nother workshop, which I may do in the future. But in project-based learning, you are taking the burden off of the teacher, and you're not speaking as much, right? There's a much more time for the students to be producing work and for the students to speak. So you might give an instruction, give an overview of what you need to do. And let's say you've got a 3-hour class. Now, your students are going to be working for an hour on their work independently, and you're going to go around and visit to make sure they're on task, to answer questions, and just to kind of observe how they are handling the material. And this makes it much easier to handle those large classes, because you're not having to talk the whole 4 hours or 3 hours, number 1, and the students are now actively doing something together. Okay, it's also great because it reduces homework and grading for you, because your students will be producing by group 1 or 2 deliverables instead of 40 different ones, right? So it's also great for that. What it also does when you've got mixed ability classes is that you can group, kind of jumping back to what we said earlier in the workshop, you can group students by level, right? So they naturally do this, almost naturally, because sometimes I don't even have to do that. Their friends that they know are more or less the same. They'll just work together. So I usually just let them choose who they'd like to work with. But I would encourage you to, if you know what the level of each of the students are, is to have pre-made groups and have them work that way. But most of the time, in my experience, they kind of do this naturally. The stronger students work together, and those who are weaker work together. So that's reason number one for using projects as a solution to helping shrink the class size and dealing with the problem of mixed ability classes. Any questions, comments there?
Just one. So earlier you spoke about the whole work study dynamic that a lot of schools have put in place. And I found that that's actually really a problem for something that might last, as you said, 3 lessons, because sometimes if it's going to be 3 lessons and you don't see them like every week, but you see them like every 3 weeks, then that's a month and a half.
So I think I bring it up in here. I can't remember, but I think for me in the experiences I've had, so when you're working in the project, it's a longer term like this. So you say usually with those in alternals, they have long classes. So you'd have a 3 or 4 hour class, right? Just once a month. And what is great about that is that you can give just the overview and kind of get them into the work. You can work with them autonomously in class, maybe for 2 hours. They can be working on the project, so they can get a lot done during that time. And you can say, okay, I would say give them a large chunk of work to do. Say you've got to do, I don't know, make a website if they're developers or something like this. They have a month and a half or a month to work on it all together and bring that back at that deliverable date the next time that you meet with them. And I think for me, it works quite well because even though they have that large gap, I'm going to give them a lot of work to do. I've already started working with them. I've kind of given them corrections, course corrected with them during the long class that I've had. And the next time I see them, it's going to be time for the deliverable time. So maybe you can't do it over 3 sessions, but you could do it over 2, given the fact that there's such a long classes for the ones in alternals. So it kind of balances it out like that. I don't know if that you could disagree on, but I feel like it really does work, even with those long breaks in between classes.
Sometimes it does, and I've definitely had the experience that you're describing, but I've also had so say it's a very regular thing. You might, as you said, put in place a sort of a tradition and routine, and that might eat up 1 hour, and then you're left with 2. And so that already means that you're not getting as much time to focus on the activity. And then I've had schools where they only give you 2 hours, and you'll see them maybe 1 week, and then the next week, and then you won't see them for 3 months. Sorry, and really, really erratic. Like when they do it regularly, that's great. At least you can figure out what you want to do around that regular pattern. But some schools don't do that. Like really,
I know it's a really big problem. I think it's because most of the time language classes come last in the schedule. And so they literally just stick the language class wherever they can fit it. And so you get this completely irrational scheduling, which makes no sense. And it's hard to work around. I'm not going to lie. I'll talk about some ways we can kind of use that kind of you can use tools either to send them homework and things like this afterwards, after the fact. So in between, if you have teams, usually the schools have teams post-pandemic, you can send them homework, but it is a hard workaround, really and truly. It can be really difficult, like the scheduling, which is actually the next one here. So time and scheduling. So one of the reasons I think project-based learning, or that's what it's technically called, but teaching through projects is great, is because it helps your classes feel more connected and continuous, especially if you have short classes. So let's say you have 1.5 hours. So the fact that you're working towards something every single time you meet, you're going from step to step, your classes feel continuous and connected, and they build upon one another. And your students have much more investment in the final deliverable. So if you've only worked on something for an hour or 2 hours even, and that's it at the end, you feel much less ownership or investment in that work versus if you spend a month, and maybe that's 3 or 4 classes working on something. And in my experience, your students give you much higher quality work when you split it up over a long period of time. It gives you the chance to check with them to make sure, course correct if the students are not doing the kind of work that you'd like. And as I said, it helps to build your students' investment in the final deliverable. They want to do a good job if they spent that much time on it. So I really do feel like in using it for both long and short classes can be a really great way to help overcome the issues with time constraints. As I was saying, I'll just kind of say it already. I already said it, but I'll just say it again here, that when we have these long classes, 3.5 hours to 4 hours long, you can spend, for example, 25% of the time explaining the concept, and then the other 50% of the time the students are working on that. You're helping them, giving them feedback, walking around the room. They're just doing their work, right? And then 25%, the last 25, can be dedicated to the students either using the target language, whether that's in presentation or an activity that you have them doing to speak and or write, right? So it can really help to break even these long classes into something really, really impactful if you're teaching in a project format. All right, suboptimal classroom infrastructure. So because you're working in groups, right? I think ideally, it's not always possible. You want to break up your classroom and move the tables around. I usually always wait for them to come in. And I've always asked permission from the administration, can I move the tables, please? And most of the time they say yes, as long as they're put back as they were. So when I wait for them to come in, my students, and I say, all right, we're gonna move the tables around. And so I don't have to do any of the heavy lifting. And you get them to move the tables into groups where they can sit 4 to 5 at a time. Okay, if you are able to do it, it's not always possible. Sometimes the tables are fixed to the floor and you can't move them. But if you can, this is going to really, really help with the engagement in your classroom. You're not going to have students so packed together that it's easy for them to start whispering and talking to each other. And you are going to be able to then walk through or go through the tables spaces and kind of keep an eye on what's going on, right? Especially during autonomous time. So I find that if your physical presence is a great way to break down or to remind the students that they're in class. So if you can go close to your students as you're walking through or going through the classroom, do that, because it's really going to help to get them to pay attention, to listen to what you have to say when you're speaking. And having them in those small tables like that kind of gives them ownership of a space in a way that the long tables don't. And I feel much more willing to work on the activity and more concentrated when they're in the small groups like that. So projects, if you're teaching in that format, it is a good reason to do that for helping to overcome the issue with suboptimal classroom infrastructure. Any questions up to that point? Okay. So reason number 4, with relevance. So the main principle behind project-based learning is that you are basing your projects on real-world activities, right? So it's something that your students should have some interest in, or that will be relevant to their future careers when they finish their studies, or something that you feel that you would like to interest them in, okay? So it should, I think I know this is a trend around all teaching, not just English, but all teaching, is that your activities, whatever you're bringing to the classroom, should have a real application in the real world. It could be as simple as CV, for example, doing a CV, doing your cover letter, and then doing a simulation of an interview for a job. It could be something much more complex if you're working with high-level students, simulation of a building proposal, for example, for engineering students, right? If you happen to know about engineering, or even if you don't, you could still do the simulation, have them go through the steps of writing a proposal for a building, doing the blueprints, if they're capable of doing that, and then presenting as if they're presenting to either a client or to their employer. And it can take a long time to go through something like that, but your students are going to be like, whoa, this is really impactful for me, not only because I'm going to be learning English, but I'm learning how to use the skills that I'm learning in my other classes, right? You're bringing everything together. And I think there's really something special about the language classroom. You don't get that opportunity in other classes, right? Where you can really bring all of these skill sets together and have your students work on something that's relevant to them or that can benefit them in the outside world. So projects are great for that. Okay. And again, you can do something that you're interested in. If you have a hobby, you have an interest, bring that to them. Introduce them to whatever it is that you're really interested about. It doesn't have to, you don't have to break your head against the glass trying to think, okay, what could I do? I don't know anything about chemical engineering or medicine. Okay. But I really love plants and we're going to learn about plants. I love plants personally. So I'm a gardener at heart. We're going to learn about plants. We're going to learn about taking care of plants. We're going to learn about all this stuff. Your fascination with that subject is going to have an impact in your students' engagement in the classroom. Okay, so when you're thinking about what kind of project you can do, think about that too. Okay. All right. So really quickly, again, I'm not going to go too deeply into this because I could literally do a whole series of workshops on how to do project-based learning, but here's a general outline, okay? If you're thinking about making a project to help mitigate those barriers that we spoke about. So you want to identify first a real-world activity as the basis of your project, okay? As I gave an example, it could be CV, cover letter, and then following up with a simulation of an interview, or it could be something much more complex. It should be relevant to their interest and their study area of study, but you can also feel free to teach what you know, as I just said. Number two, so you want to envision at least 2 group deliverables plus 1 individual assessment, right? So it helps to reduce with the homework load if you're doing group assignments, but you also, I think, should have the opportunity so that you can individually assess a student's performance, either written or spoken, and you can do that, whichever skill you want to evaluate, you can do, okay? It could be all combination of the 4, it could be just all one, right? It could be all written, it could be all oral, if you will, but I think it's great to have 2 group deliverables at minimum, and then at least 1 individual assessment. Okay, and you can do the aggregate for that grade at the end. 3, so your project should take course over at least a minimum of 3 sessions, if possible, right? I know it may not always be, especially as we were talking about earlier with alternance, it can be difficult, but I think 3 sessions is a minimum ideal for when we're talking about project-based learning. Personally, I've done projects that have lasted an entire semester. It was the whole semester. We did, I think, 8 sessions on it, and we got to the end. There was this big deliverable that the students had to do, and it was amazing, the work that they did, because it took them a whole semester to complete. And I was really proud, personally, of what they did. Once you've gotten everything in place, you know what you're going to do. Students are often not really familiar with project-based learning, right? So you're gonna have to whet their appetite a little bit before you jump into the project. If you just start, we're gonna teach this project, we're gonna do this, they may have a bit of resistance because they're not comfortable or aware of this style of teaching. But you can use videos, you can do a little presentation on your own, but something that will begin to get them interested in the content and the material that you will cover is a great way to begin a project in the classroom. Okay, and then throughout the project, you're going to want to provide real-time feedback on your group's progress. That can be going around to each table, speaking to them. That can be giving feedback directly to your students' deliverables as they're handing them in. But feedback is really important to make sure that you're course correcting if your students are not doing the work that you'd really like them to do, or at the quality level that you'd like them to do. Okay, and one thing that I say is a benefit of working over a long time is that you get the opportunity to course correct. It's not just like, here, I send you the homework, do it, and it comes back. Well, you have a couple more sessions before the assignment could actually be due, and you can get the time to say, I know this is not actually what I'd like. I want you to try to change it, and they can do that. All right. And then you want to finish up your project once it's all done. Having your students do self-reflection and thinking about their own performance on the project. I sometimes include their self-evaluation in the final grade, not always, but you can if you like. But I think it's really beneficial to have your students think about, how did we work together as a group? Were we able to implement this skill or this skill in the project? Did I learn XYZ grammar or XYZ vocabulary, right? Having them think about it at the end is a really great technique to help them improve once for the next time. All right. Oof, that was long. So we finished talking about solutions to structural issues, okay? Looking at building trust in your classroom. Before I go into that, is there any questions or comments? You guys are still with me?
Yeah, definitely. I think project-based learning is actually a great tool, but as you also mentioned it's not always easy, and especially with alternate students. But it has two I think two good reasons for me, two good reasons to do that. It's first, it's good for their, especially for the alternate student, because it gives them some sense of how to use English, what's English is important, but linked to their actual study program.
Yes.
And also team working is, you know, a skill. In the corporate system, it's a very important skill, and first-year students are not really good at it at the beginning, and they rely a lot on whether they like a person or not, and they're not always able to work with someone they dislike. So it's a great tool to build team working and to make them a good team player.
Oh, yes. I wholeheartedly agree on that. So that soft skill, working in teams, navigating the whole thing, learning how to
deal with dealing with different individuals, personality, and traits.
Exactly.
And I've had challenging, and they learn a lot.
I've had some interesting results with my classes with that. So had to be a bit of a goal referee here. Whoa, calm down, guys. Let's see what we can do to make this work better. I mean, that's our job as the facilitator in the role of project-based learning. You facilitate in the classroom. And that's one of our jobs, is to help them to overcome those issues with working together.
And it also builds self-confidence. I mean, I've seen some very interesting results. I teach to bachelor in sales and marketing students, and I make them work on a negotiation in their program. They have to be able to negotiate and find the right argument to sell a product. So I set up a group and I asked them to work on, they had to pick a product first and then try to negotiate it. And I did it in the form of role play, and they really get into it.
Yeah, but role plays can be a great tool.
Yeah, it was.
I love
role play and project-based learning are actually quite good together. And I had a very nice result on that, and they were quite proud of themselves. They were really happy to do that, and they learn a lot this way. So yeah, I do believe it's an interesting tool to use in class.
I got to add that, the confidence to the slides. It does help with that.
Yeah, they learn about themselves on the way.
So building trust. Okay, so here we're getting into a much more, this is deep stuff here, right here. So establishing from day one, as we already spoke about, that your classroom is a safe space. For me, I think similar to, I can't remember who said that I think it was Halima, you said that you do, talking about accent and pronunciation, I think you said, I don't know. Yeah, so I always start my very first classes about that. I introduce myself, do a little activity. They can ask me questions about America, whatever. But then we go into what's the difference between accent and pronunciation, and why we should not be worried about our accents. I tell them the story that my mom is British. She grew up in London. My dad is from Wisconsin by way of Mississippi. They sound totally different. They have not the same accent at all. And I have some weird accent in between them. So accents in English are all over the place. And there's no reason for us to be embarrassed or have shame about that. It's part of our identity. It's part of who we are. When I speak French, I have an English or an American accent. I'm not afraid of that or ashamed. That's who I am. I'm not ashamed to be an American, not always. But you know, so you've got to make that clear from day one, that your place, your classroom is a place where you're not caring about their accent. You can work on pronunciation. That is a thing, and work on that in class, but that trying to sound like a native speaker or the Queen of England or the King of England, I guess you have to say, is not the goal, and it shouldn't be, unless you're an actor or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Unless you're an actor, you want to become one.
Exactly. So make it clear as well that ridicule or laughing at other students is not going to be tolerated under any circumstances in your classroom. You don't have to be, and I think it's just you can do many different ways. As you said, Halima, writing on the board or having it on the wall, the rules, the constitution of the class, whatever you want, get creative with it, but make it clear that you're not going to tolerate that kind of behavior in your class. Once you have that established, it's just such a breath of fresh air, especially for students who are really afraid, like pathologically afraid of speaking in the classroom, right? When they see an example that you are going to make sure that they're going to be in a safe space. Okay.
Yeah, also add on that there are no rules that state, or no one ever said that because learning a new language means losing your accent. It's your identity, it's your culture. And I mean, there are no reason that you should give up on that. You know? Exactly.
If I can die tomorrow or when I die, what I really want is to have at least convinced some French people to stop worrying about this. If I've done that in my life,
you got me. Yeah, it's about communication. It's not about identity. Where I come from, to be honest, but French people are really deep into that accent thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of cultural background and baggage that come with this. The revolution, trying to integrate the country, trying to make sure that France was one homogeneous country. They got rid of all of the regional languages and standardized.
Yeah, it's political. It's definitely political. Yeah.
So it has a deep history and it's very strong here. It's also in other European countries, but I think France particularly has its own storied history with speech and accent in French alone. So it's
in French and in between French people also. It's
Okay, so step 2 is to begin each year with personalized feedback. Okay, so in having individual interviews, you can conduct them either in person if you can. Sometimes it's not possible. If you have a class of 50 people or 40 people, it's not going to be possible for you to take them in either individually or small groups to do a quick interview with your students. It may not be possible. A way you can do this same activity is to have them record audio or video and then have you give responses later to your questions. But I think it's a really great step. And one of the biggest things that I've seen, or the best performing activities at the end of the semester, when I ask them how did things go, when I do my little survey, this activity at the beginning of the semester was the highest rated thing. Was they really love that one-to-one connection. They're coming to talk to me. They talk about what their previous experiences with English have been, what their goals are, where they think that they're the strongest and where they think that they're the weakest. And I get to listen to them and I get to understand my class at a much deeper level. And they get the opportunity to really feel listened to in terms of what their fears are regarding English, or their desires or their goals are. Okay, so if you can do it, go ahead and do it. It can be messy because you have students in the other room who are doing whatever. Give them an activity to work on, right? But this is a really important activity to start the year with, I think. Okay, and have them set that time aside to do it if you can. So the questions that I ask them, just if you want to know, are these 4. So I have them write this down beforehand. So the ones who are a bit weaker, they don't know what to say, they get the time to formulate their answers before they come to me. So how would you describe your past experience with English? anything, whether they've been abroad, whether they have a parent that's a native speaker or not, whether they've had a negative experience. I just want them to tell me what it's been like with English in the past. What are your strongest skills in English? Because even if someone is a beginner, they may speak better than they can listen, or vice versa. Okay. Which skills do they feel that they need the most improvement? Here you probably get a whole long list. It's like everything. Nothing is good, right? But it is helpful to have them target that. And then what area of English would you like to focus on improving this semester? Because sometimes they have these goals in mind that I want to do this whole, I want to improve all this. Well, we only have 3 months together, or maybe a year. What do you want to improve this year? What do you want to improve this semester? Okay. And that is a much more manageable chunk and a goal that they can set for themselves that's achievable. You'll have these questions if you want to use them later, by the way. All right, step 3, introducing rituals and traditions in your classroom. Okay, so you can do whatever you want. This can be super different for every single teacher. But rituals and traditions really help to set the scene for your students feeling that this place, this time that I spend with this teacher, right? We're all in we're having a shared experience. It's something that they can expect. They know it's going to happen every class or every so often. And there is a sense of community that is built around these traditions or rituals. Okay. There's many. I have here several examples here. My go-to tradition was to ask a question at the beginning of the class, an open-ended question. Actually, I did it with you guys just at the beginning. I would say, do you like tea or coffee? What do you prefer? Why? And they go ahead and do that. Or one of the big ones is, tell me what you're watching on Netflix or any other streaming site today. I need some suggestions. And we have a whole big thing. And maybe it takes 20 to 30 minutes, but if you have a 4-hour class, that's great. But it's a really good way to get insight into your students and know who they are. And they get to warm up a bit before going into the material. But you could do a lot of different things. Birthday rituals, cool down recap, showing funny or entertaining videos every once in a while. What's this one? Redstone, greenstone. I had it was blackstone, whitestone, but someone suggested that was probably a bit too cleaving. But basically it's to say what's going well and what's going not so well in the class. So you can have, I make a ball of paper, red paper, throw it off, is say, who wants the redstone, who wants the greenstone, right? I throw it to them at the end to say like, okay, so I really liked the activity that you did, Masha, or I'm really enjoying this. Or someone might say, actually, I really would like to learn more about this, right? Or I prefer we didn't do any more of that. It's a good way for you to get instant feedback from your students, and they feel they're participating in that. And you can do it for many different things. The point is that having rituals, a set ritual that you do every class or every once in a while, whether that's for a birthday or at the end of the semester or something like this, it helps to build a sense of community and participation among your students. Okay. Questions, comments?
So do you prefer tea or coffee?
So I prefer tea personally. Coffee is great because I need to get, strong hit and maybe after lunch or for eating, but tea is my go-to. I love the ritual of tea. I love it so much. I enjoy making it. I have a little boiler that sets the temperature.
And different temperatures. Yeah.
Exactly. I have a timer on my phone set for tea. Exactly. So
okay.
It's I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to tea.
Good to know.
Yeah. But yeah. So
I have one question. How do you ensure that the question doesn't go over too long? Because you said like it might take 30 minutes, but I mean, if you've got a class of like even just 20 students and they all give a decent answer and you want to kind of have it back and forth, it can take like an hour,
Yeah. So I've done it before when I had classes that were kind of like larger, like around 20 something. I only had maybe 2 hours. Is I put a timer on the screen. And I just said, okay, 1 minute response, go ahead, right? Help them to be concise and learn how to be pointed with the words. At the very beginning of the semester, they will have a hard time doing that if you're doing the timer, because they're not used to that. They feel the pressure, but over time, they get very good at giving concise answers. And that can be excellent, especially if you're working with business students and you need to train them not just for the English, but how to be direct and not go all over the place. It can be a great way to mitigate that and make sure you're on task. Most of the time, I don't have too much of a problem. I have to kind of more pull out for most of my students, but using a timer is a good way to.
But then when they give an answer, you just go, cool, next person, or because I mean that means that then you're not interacting, right?
I mean,
I've understood.
Maybe I will say, yeah, sometimes it's just like that. If we don't have that much time, I'll just be like, yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you for sharing. And then I go on. Because the point is for them to talk, is to warm them up if I'm doing the open-ended question. Me talking back to them is an extra plus, because it's the warm fuzzies and everything. But I really want them, the goal for me is to get them to talk and to warm up their English a bit before we get into the material for the day. So if I don't get a chance to give them too much of a feedback or say anything, by the way, I don't correct any English during this part for me personally. This is like, you just talk. I'm not going to give you any correction.
I was thinking follow-up questions that makes it more spontaneous, because if you put the question on the board, right? So like tea or coffee, some of them, if not a lot of them, are going to type into Google their answer and translate it. And so if you have that follow-up question, you know if they're actually speaking English.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking.
No, I mean,
they're just using Google.
No, it's a good point. I think, I mean, depending on how long your class is, I mean, you could modify it. You don't have to do this particular warm-up. There's many or ritual or anything like that. If your class it's just not right for your class, and do another ritual that will fit. But I think either if you're concerned about time, you can do a timer. If you want the feedback, I think you could maybe ask one follow-up question just to make sure, but maybe if it doesn't fit your class, there's plenty others you could do.
Oh, I was just wondering, what you do, because I mean, I've tested it a lot, and it's just that I obviously it's nice to interact and ask questions and learn. And the only problem with it is that if I want to do everyone, it
can be hard to do.
Time. Yeah.
So you could say, I mean, you could try it. It's a little bit less, you'll have less, you won't be able to give feedback directly to them, but you can do groups of 2 for like pairs and say like, okay, you guys ask each other the question, and then you kind of ask randomly to say, you give me your feedback, tell me what the person said, and that way you're still getting the benefit of them speaking, and maybe saving a bit of time if you need. But it's true, you won't have that level of interaction if you do it that way, but it could be a way to overcome that.
Yeah, I've tried that.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me commenting on that, that's something I learned while taking the SALTA certification. We, at the beginning of any lesson, we usually start with a warm-up question or an anecdote, and then we just put the student in pairs and we ask them to share the answer. And we set up some time. We actually we tell them you have 2-3 minutes, and then we have some kind of open class feedback, and then we ask each other to share their answer. Yeah,
I mean, it can work like that too. I mean, I think you just have to have a very clear idea. What do I want out of this activity, whatever it is, whether activity, ritual, tradition, whatever. What do I want out of it, right? And so as long as you can still keep that objective or that outcome, you can modify it however it will fit, I think. Okay. Wait, hold on, where are we at? So let me see, we are at 11:17. You guys are really good with the sharing. Thank you very much for this. I'm going to actually go ahead and skip straight to the breakout rooms. There are, how many of you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's going to be a little bit awkward, but we'll make 2 breakout rooms. Okay. And you'll go into them automatically. And let me go here. So what I'd like you to do in the breakout rooms is we've heard about ways to overcome all of these different barriers to engagement. And I'd like you to do two things in your breakout rooms. First is to brainstorm ideas for real world projects that you could do with your students that you've actually had or students in the past. And then rituals and traditions that you could introduce into your classroom to use alongside your regular coursework. Okay, so again, that's real world projects or ideas for projects. It doesn't have to be fully hatched. Okay, but just ideas. What do you think would be a great thing to do with your students? And then rituals and traditions that you could do on a regular basis alongside the regular coursework. Okay, once we've finished doing the brainstorming, and we'll bring everyone back to the main room, and then we'll share that together. Okay. Questions or comments?
Just that I'll have to be heading out, Larnell, but
Okay.
thank you very much for your
No
presentation. It was
problem.
really interesting.
Thank you
And
so much.
good luck to everyone else and happy brainstorming discussions.
Thanks so much, Ali.
Thank you.
Bye.
Larnell, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set up the breakout rooms here. So, I didn't see you there, Geraldine. Sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the breakout room. Where are they? Oh, there you go. Okay. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I'll make 2 breakout rooms. It's going to automatically assign you. Okay, I'm going to set the timer for 15 minutes. That may be too much. If it's too much, that's fine. You can finish and come back to the main room, no problem. But I'm going to put it for 15 minutes, okay? And like I said, dig deep, think about the classes that you have actually had or currently have, and try to apply what you're thinking about to that, okay? Ready? Go. And
Oh, I'm the first one here.
You're the first one back. Yeah.
It was too short.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, maybe we can continue a little bit in here, but I wanted to make sure I got the time to give you to hear what you had to say. I know that brainstorming can go, whoa.
No, it's nice.
Okay, we're just waiting for 2 more. Okay.
Hi
Okay, so
again.
that's everybody back now. Good. Okay.
Well, for some reason, we've been left behind.
It didn't want to take you out?
You know, I had to do it manually, to click on, we
Yeah,
want to go back to the main room. I don't know.
Well, breakout
That's
rooms
it.
are still a work
Yeah.
in progress for me sometimes.
Yeah, I
Um,
use Zoom quite a lot, but I don't even recall ever using the breaking room. So it was quite interesting to see you doing it today.
you guys learned something. Okay, so I want to hear from you guys. So I think it was Gabriela and who was with Gabriela? It was Gabriela and
Geraldine,
Geraldine. Okay, so what did you guys say?
just before we start, I'm
Mhm.
gonna have to leave at 10 too. So I'm
Okay,
just saying I won't interrupt at one
Okay.
point. I'm just gonna leave.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry
No
about that.
problem.
No, it was very interesting to share with someone else
Mhm.
on these subjects and to get to know someone with a different experience.
Mhm.
So I don't know, Gabriela, if you want to, I don't know.
Yeah, it was very interesting to hear Geraldine's input on projects at high school level
Mhm.
and about French students getting excited about their ideal schools or making presentations of their ideal school or finding arguments for going on strike.
Yeah.
That could be a very, very, very interesting topic to try out with
Oh yeah.
university students as well, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, and I shared with Geraldine my experience in an engineering school where we work on projects as and most of them are in HR, like creating their own CVs based on the resources and discussions we had beforehand and clarifying all the details, or participating in mock job interviews or presenting their elevator pitch
Okay.
at the end
Oh yeah.
of
Yeah.
at the end of some classes where we clarify what that is, what it should be like, and so on.
Okay. So I'm gonna just kind of take, so for me, so what I can see is you got some great activities here. So let's say we're gonna focus on the engineering students. We say we got the engineering students. There's I don't know, 30 of them in the classroom. We're gonna say that we're gonna make this over 4 sessions, more or less. We're gonna start with CV and cover letter writing, perhaps. If they already have one, we'll maybe convert it into English, have them apply or adapt their CV directly to a job that's a real one. So have them look on Indeed or another job searching website, and they got to adapt their skill sets and their experiences. They can make it up to that job, and also their cover letter to that job. You've taught them how to write the cover letter. You've taught them the English, so the correct tone to use. That's one deliverable. Sorry. And then you can say, we're going to prepare them for the second deliverable would be the simulation for, I think you said it was the interview.
Yeah, yes, a job,
That
a
would be
real
exactly. So simulation for interview.
job ad, and they applied for that particular job, and how they would prepare for a job interview for that particular job. That's really challenging.
Exactly. So they have to tailor it, learning, and believe it or not all students realize they gotta do that, do a little bit of research about the company before they go into the interview. And then your third and final deliverable, I'm imagining, could be something like, this would be the individual one, the elevator pitch. where they've got, was it 90 seconds? I think an elevator pitch is supposed to
About
be.
2 minutes max. Mhm.
Exactly. 90 seconds to pitch themselves or an idea, if it's an engineering idea, whatever it is. And so you've got it in that kind of a breakdown. So you've got 3 deliverables here. 1 is individual, 2 are group, and or maybe the CVs are also individual too, but you've got 2 individual and 1 group. And then you're going to be focusing each of the classes of the 3 different things, and the 4th one is dedicated to the day of the delivery of the elevator pitch, right? And so that's a project, right? That's long term. You've got plenty of time to course correct with your students. It's interesting for them because it's super relevant, right? And you address a lot of the issues that we spoke about in terms of barriers to engagement. And you can add lots of different activities in there around to make it fun and engaging for the students. So it's a great idea. Did you guys come up with
the
any
curriculum at the engineering school? But anyway, when I work privately, I definitely go through these with every single professional during their course. Yes.
Yeah. Did you guys come up with any traditions and rituals to use?
Well, I really liked Gabriella, what she does at the beginning of the class. She asks rapidly how students are feeling today, if they're in a good mood, in a bad mood, or whatever, and have them explain a bit. She has built a very strong sense of trust that everything in the classroom is safe, confidential, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it permits her to lead the class knowing how students feel, their resistance or their enthusiasm, or and take it from there. And I really think that's interesting, actually.
Yeah.
I don't expect them to come to class every time motivated. These are human beings. These are not robots. They will not be have a linear behavior. So I take them from where they are and I bring them to where they should be.
Yeah, that's a really good idea to check in. Yeah. We did this, it was with the very young students, so they had a little board so they could point to it and say, this is how I'm feeling, with like the face, like, the pain scale. It was kind of like that, but I think that could be a very good idea to do with older students as well. I would integrate that into my class. Thank you very much for that suggestion.
Usually it's an open-ended question. It's just how are you, but they know that after how are you, they really can say what is happening.
Yeah.
So that will be accepted, received. They will feel supported, and they will be able to get themselves in the mood, the right mood for the lesson. This is very, very important, because sometimes they come immediately after work or after a meeting and they need to switch, and it's not always possible to switch instantaneously. So that's
sometimes they just need to like exhale a bit, like let it out
a little bit, yes, without playing the therapist role, but
hey,
really
I think we have that hat as teachers. We're also a little bit of a therapist, just a little bit. I think
a little bit, yes, not too much,
worker,
because we don't have the training, but we can do some things for them to really get the most out of each lesson. That's very, very important for them.
Yeah. Wonderful. Oh, it was great stuff you guys did.
Well,
all right. How about the other group? What are some of the things that you guys had to share in terms of project ideas?
Well, I like I said to my peers, I'm not really teaching at the moment, and I've never taught here, so it's a bit difficult for me to come up with ideas. But since I work at a cybersecurity private university, if I were teaching English here, I would probably have some projects related to cybersecurity and or like Gabriella and Geraldine said, job seeking, interviews, cover letters, CM, because they're all in alternance.
Yes.
So it would be quite useful for them to find a job, find an alternance now or for the future.
Okay. Now, Mary, do you know much yourself about cybersecurity, or is it a mystery to you?
I'm just getting started, so I'm not really familiar with it, but I would have to if I were to teach them stuff related to cybersecurity in English, obviously.
So one of the things, so when you have classes like that, where you've got something super specific and maybe they've actually told you, you need to teach them, you know, vocabulary or
Yes.
simulation, things like this that is to do with that. So it can be super daunting sometimes because you're like, I don't know anything. The first time I taught engineers, I had no idea anything about engineering. But that shouldn't be daunting to you. You will have to do a bit of research. What I usually try to do is try to understand what are the kinds of things that they will need to do. One of the things engineers need to do, for example, is appel d'offres to respond to this. I can't remember how you call that in English. Call to tender?
Bidding?
Tender.
Yeah, bidding and tender.
Bidding,
When you
exactly
bidding and tenders. Yeah.
So I just did a quick research and I just took what I understood from what that actually the process is that and simplified it way down, like really simplified it. And then I constructed a lesson around that. So I don't have to do any technical terms. They should know those things. They need to look those words up. Exactly. You don't have to be concerned about that, but you're giving them an opportunity to practice that structure in English. And that's all you need to do. And you can turn that into a great project that can be super rewarding, takes 4 weeks, I don't know, to finish or even more, and that they really get deep into.
Yeah.
Good. Anyone, any other ideas from that group?
One of the things I would like to try next year, the next university year is I have BTS student, 2+ year level student, technical degrees in small and medium businesses. And their final exam, their written final exam is usually a text, trend topic about work life mostly. And they have to give some kind of report of this text in French. Also, I don't find this assignment very interesting. The idea here is for the student to stay in touch or to keep themselves up to date about the current topic in their work life. But let's be honest, that's not something they do very often. Most of them don't even care about it. So I've been thinking that maybe one of the ritual in tradition I can do at the beginning of after a warm-up, because I always do a warm-up session. It's selecting at every class select a 3-minute video about a trend on the labor market and have them to brainstorm, to discuss. So probably they will be informed about our topic, but I would also like them to have a discussion, to think about it, to be able to express if they are the pros, the cons. Is that something they would consider in their own company, something like that? So it will have a double aim, get them to be up to date about the current trends, but also hopefully to get them used to check, what's going on in the world. I'm hoping that it will be easier for them then to work on those written assignments, because obviously if they know about the topic, it will be easier to talk about it, So instead of waiting for them or expecting them to go and look for it, I will bring the material into the class as some kind of warm-up exercise at the beginning of the lesson. So
that's a great idea.
That would be,
it's a great idea. I mean, we understand students are students, right? So they're not always going to, so bringing the material to them, I think asking questions is a great thing. I usually do the format, a modified version of the Socratic method, which is highly used in the United States in university, which is it's a question. So you're not necessarily delivering right away the material, but I would ask 3 questions related to the topic. And then have them discuss that quickly, maybe 5 minutes, and then I bring them back, and then I'm asking question to every group, and from their answers, I'm going to give the lecture, basically.
Obviously the idea is also to link.
Exactly. What do you think about this? And it's okay. Well, this is what this is saying. This is what this is saying, and it's involved. It's not a lecture where I'm just talking. they're actually participating as well. And then after that, after they're familiar with the material enough, maybe a couple of times you could do a debate, you could do anything, whatever you want. Yeah, but that's great.
And on the side, I can also, focus on lexis, or even on grammar, if the idea is to talk about previous experience or something in the past. I mean, the three main topics they had for the final exams this year, but quiet, silent, I don't know how they call it, quiet quitting or silent quitting.
Yes.
Exactly, the great quiet quitting, great resignation, and the 4 days week trial. And most of my students never heard of those topics. It's everywhere on the news, but they're not really curious enough to go and get them. So bringing the material will be one of the idea. And as a real world project, those same BTS students, they have what they call a fiche de communication to present as an oral exam at the end of the year. So it's basically about presenting the company that they're doing their work placement in, and their duties and the size of the company, what the industries they're in, and so on. And I've been thinking that that's something I could do as a project-based learning. And something that I didn't consider, but you mentioned, Lionel, is that it could actually be a semester project-based learning,
Yes.
So slowly I will get them to their final oral exam. So I think that's
so you don't have to rush. And that's something I learned personally as a teacher it took me a while to get it into my mind. I thought they would be bored, or I was worried that they would be bored with the progress. So I would go really fast through things, but it's okay to take 2 months to get through something. If you're if you have control over your own curriculum and you don't have to do something from outside, there's no one telling you to do stuff, you can go slowly. And I think it's great because, as I said earlier, you get to course correct. So if they're doing, you've sent the assignment and you look at it, you're like, that's not the quality that I want. It's not okay. You're not going to penalize them. They have no chance now to correct it. Once you can say, I saw it. That was a rough draft. You need to make this and this changes. Come back now 2 weeks later. You see, this is the final result. It's going to be much better than if you had just only had them turn it in that one time and that's it. So turn it into a semester project. That's great. That means you have nothing.
I didn't think of that. I thought it might be too long and I'm going to lose them on the way. But actually, I don't want them to feel dragged into something that's going to take ages. But because it's their final exam, that's going to be very important for them to be able to manage this part of their project. And also some of my students, I have really mixed level ability in the same class. It might actually give them the time they need. As you just rightly put it, there is no need to rush. And sometimes they need that time. It's also, I mean, for the teacher, for me, it will be also the opportunity to, to have personal, individual feedback along the way and take the time to make sure everybody is on the right track, but also pretty much at the same advancement level. So that actually could be a good idea. I'm gonna try it on.
Well, I would love to hear how it works, how it turns out at the end of the year, because I think that could be a great project, honestly. All right, guys. Are you still? Yes, I'm screen sharing still. So I'm so sorry that you can maybe take one more little thing, but we have only 5 minutes left, so I don't want to go over because I know you guys have schedules and things to do. But is there one tiny little thing left to share from what you guys spoke about? Okay. Well, I want to say a big thank you to everyone for being here with me and for sharing as well. You guys are really good sharers. I can tell you all have the teacher on you, so it's coming through the screen. And it was great to spend time with you and discussing one of the biggest issues, I think, for teachers, which is, as we know, classroom engagement. Hopefully, you've been able to get something new or some idea that you can take away to use in your class next year. So I know that school is mostly done for most of us now. I was going to do a quick poll thing to show you guys to show you guys a tool that you could use to help when you're trying to get your students to participate in large groups. I'll just show that to you here quickly. I just need to stop sharing this and share this screen. Okay, so can you guys see this?
Yeah.
All right, so this is called Slido, SLIDO.do. Do you know it, Gabriella?
No, we can see the link in the on the upper corner. Yes,
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, so if you go to, you can go on your computer, you can go on your phone, you can go to the QR code here. This is what ideas will take you, which ideas will you take from today's workshop to use in your classes next year? So this is going to make a word cloud. And it's a great way if you've got a lot of students in your classroom at the end of the class or at the beginning of the class, just to kind of get an idea of what they're thinking. You can also do polls, you can do quizzes, I think, on there. And it's just an extra bit of engagement. It's cool. They get to use their phones for that.
Yeah.
And it's a great idea to use. So I thought I'd share that with you and also try to get your answers here today.
Okay.
Semester-long project, yes. Rapport, like a report?
Yes, the rapport we build with students.
Oh yes, report, excuse me. I've been here too long. I read it directly in
French.
French. I'm sorry. Yes, rapport. It's super important.
How did I get there, Lana? For some reason I can't.
It's not working. Well, you can, so usually you can either go to slido.com and type in the code that's there.
Yeah.
Edition,
So just typing the code, I just custom paste it. It should, okay, let's try.
or go to the QR code on your phone. It will
Yes.
take you.
Oh yeah, actually I could have done that. Yeah.
So traditions, excellent.
Mhm.
The traditions are great. I mean, it's something, once I stopped, I didn't do the open-ended question at the beginning because there was just not enough time. And my students were like revolution. They were like, no, monsieur, please, we need the, so when they get used to it, once it really comes to them, they expect it. And it really does help to just make that class something special for them.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for showing us the site.
Yeah. So, well, I guess there's only 4 of you, so you don't have to worry. But yeah, it's a great longer projects. Yes, excellent. So it's a great tool. You can use it in your classroom. I think it's very easy. It's free. There's a free version, paid version as well. But this is a great way to integrate a little bit of interaction in your classroom. I'm just really quickly going to go back to the, here we go. Screen. So as I said to you guys at the beginning, I have a company which is Resourceful, and we've started this project about a year ago now, and Resourceful is should I say this? A resource, basically. That's what it's in its name, for language teachers to help them to manage and teach large groups of students, right, in person. So in September, we are going to be coming out with a learning management system, which is designed to help teachers teach large groups of students, giving feedback directly, sending homework directly. You can create your own lessons on the learning management system, but if you have not enough time or you need a time saver, we will be having a large catalog of ready-made courses designed specifically for teaching at university level. That's something I think we don't see that very often. I've looked around it forever, and I'm very excited to have that out there for people to access, that those classes are designed for teaching at university level. So that will be out in September. We're going to be starting the early sign up, I believe, at the end of next month, so the end of July. So you guys will be informed of that when the early sign up is ready. And if you want to keep up to date with what's going on with Resourceful and the project, you can go to our website and follow us on social media, because we got posting a lot all over the place. And I'll be sending you the slides from today, so you will have those to consult at your leisure, and you will be able to watch the video in a week's time if you'd like to do that. It'll be edited so that it'll be much shorter and nicer to look at the end. But thank you guys so much for being
Thanks
with
to you.
this morning.
Thank you, Lorna.
Thank you. This was really,
Thank
really
you for
interesting.
giving us the time and the space to
Yes.
share
Yes.
and exchange as a teaching. That's something that I really miss a lot. I've been a freelance teacher for a little over a year now. And I miss that. I miss having fellow colleagues. We can share our experience and together. So thank you for giving us the time and the space to do that today.
You're more than welcome. And hopefully soon there'll be more to come. I know vacation is coming up. Praise the Lord, but we are going to
We need that.
we all need it. But after vacation is over, there'll be more to come. All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Well, thank you all, and I wish
you
a day and a happy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Lana. Bye-bye.
Bye.